welcome back to another episode of the Within Reach podcast. Today I am joined by my co-host Crystal.
Oh, good to be back.
I know, it's been a minute, right?
Yeah, just figured out it was 3 months, so a hot minute.
It's been a minute. And you know what's funny? In this intro, which was one sentence, by the way, I genuinely was like, I was going to say episode, but I don't even know what episode number we're up to. So
if you don't know, I definitely don't know.
welcome back, guys. It's nice to have you here. Today's going to be a really cool topic, something that we haven't actually spoken on this season yet, and it is reverse dieting. Now, if you've gone back and listened to previous podcast episodes that we've done, we have gone right into the depth of both fat loss phases and also build phases. And now today we want to touch on reverse dieting, which arguably I would say is the most confusing for people. Would you agree?
Yes, because I feel we don't exactly have a weight loss problem. We have a weight maintenance problem. So a lot of people can lose the weight but do it in really drastic ways with dieting, but then don't know how to reverse themselves out of it and then just bounce back to where they were.
You actually nailed that when it comes to a quick description of like what it is or how or what you need to do, right? Because you are so right. It's for a lot of people, fat loss is easy in the sense that once they go into dieting phases, the weight does come off. But then we see this yo-yo dieting consistently of people then going back to their old weight or gaining more than what they started with and then losing it and then going back and forth. And it just becomes very unsustainable.
Absolutely. Like I see it a lot in even around my family, because they just see what's on TV. They see like the weight loss shakes and just eat less, move more, and not sustainable ways. So like, yes, they lose the weight, but as soon as they go back to their normal lifestyle, it just comes back on.
Yeah, for sure. So what I'm going to do, just to give a bit of an overview on reverse dieting, is kind of explain to everyone what it is and how you do it. And then what we'll do today is we'll touch on our experiences, both personally and then as coaches from a aesthetics background and what I notice as more of an aesthetics coach, and then for yourself on performance and how it actually affects performance as well. So just to kind of start off with you guys, and I'm going to try and make this as simple as possible because I do understand that it sometimes does take a minute to wrap your head around. Generally speaking, people do think if you want to diet, you just eat less and move more, which is what you just said, Crystal. And whilst to a degree that is true, you know, you need to be eating in a deficit, which we all hear on social media all the time, just eat in a deficit and move as much as you can so that you're burning energy. The idea is that you will lose weight. And to a degree that is true. But there's a few things that happen in the body when we do underconsume for long periods of time. And when we talk specifically around reversing, we might talk on two different like versions. So version one is you are in a fat loss phase, and then you're trying to maintain your fat loss. So a lot of people when they're dieting, so if you're somebody who's dieting right now or has dieted in the past, you might get to the end of your dieting phase where you've dropped the weight that you want to drop. And then all of a sudden from there, you think, well, I've lost the weight now. Now I can just go back to what I was doing before. Or you just stop being as on top of the nutrition that you were kind of doing prior or the training you were doing prior. And what actually happens is when you're dieting and then you finish dieting, you can't just go back to your normal calories straight away. There's a process in the body called downregulation. And what this means is that as we reduce calories and intake over time, the body has a safety mechanism which helps keep you safe, in which the body actually slows down to support the lack of energy coming in.
And this can be as little as like not fidgeting as much and just like choosing to sit down as more, and your body will find any way to just not to conserve that energy.
Yeah, which is why people go, well, I'm dieting and now I feel really tired. It's because the body is trying to reduce as much movement as possible to almost counterbalance the food you're not consuming. So it is a safety mechanism. And so it is quite normal for people to get more tired and, you know, a bit less motivated when they're dieting. But as this process happens and as you go through a dieting phase, we then have the downregulation, which is what the slowing of our systems are called. It's called downregulation. The body starts to downregulate, which is, like you just said, Crystal, the body won't move as much. You'll get more tired, more fatigued, which will make you not want to do as much. And it's a natural way for, I guess, us to manage is probably the right word, manage the dieting that we're doing. And what happens is people go through these phases, they diet, and then as soon as they're finished dieting, they've dropped their 5 kilos, 10 kilos, etc. They don't understand that you actually now have created a new maintenance. So maintenance, just to clarify, means maintaining where you're at. Deficit is dropping the calories to be in a deficit of energy, which is going to help you lose weight. And then a surplus is where we're actually consuming more than we need, which is where we can build muscle or gain weight. Now, people go through the deficit and then they just go back to maintenance, which they assume maintenance is the calories they started on. So I see this happen a lot of time from a aesthetics world, where you might start, you might be eating roughly 2,000 calories per day. And then all of a sudden you're dieting, so you reduce your intake. The second you've dropped the weight, you go back to what you were eating previously, assuming that's your maintenance. But when downregulation happens, actually our maintenance changes and it becomes the amount we're consuming. So if you're dieting on 1,500 calories, or just generally if you're eating 1,500 calories, that's going to become your maintenance over time. If you're dieting on or eating 1,200 calories, that's going to become your maintenance over time. The body has a really great way of adapting to its surroundings and its environment. And so that is why that happens. I think people get very confused with macro calculators too for this reason.
Absolutely. And I think for also the general population, macros, calories, surplus, deficit, it can all seem a bit confusing. Or some people that are tracking but not doing it accurately. So they say, oh, I'm tracking but it's not working for me. But a lot of people overestimate how much they burn and how much they do, and then underestimate how much they're actually consuming.
Yeah. And so when you're then going to a macro calculator and it tells you your maintenance is 2,000, but you've been eating 1,500, your maintenance is not 2,000. That's what it should be. But because you've been eating so little when you're dieting, you end up having 1,500 as your maintenance or whatever it is that you're consuming. Now, what I see happen all the time is people will go back to what they perceive to be their maintenance and they put the weight straight back on. Why is that? Well, if we just, as an example, say that you have been dieting on 1,500 calories and then you finish your dieting phase and your new maintenance is 1,500, that means anything above that is now a surplus. Anything above that is now more food than your body's used to, and therefore risk of putting body fat back on. And so this is why a lot of this happens, because people don't understand this concept and they just reverse all the hard work that they've put in. We see it happen quite often with clients, where clients will get to their fat loss goal and then as soon as they get to it, they completely check out of the process of reversing, which we'll go into in a minute. And they go, oh, I've lost the weight now. And then they just all of a sudden hang up their coaching shoes and they're like, I don't want to do coaching anymore. And we go, you're missing the most important part, which is actually not the diet. It's what you do after that. So then they leave coaching. And I've had it happen a few times where clients come back 6 months later and go, oh my God, help me. And I go, I told you so. So let's kind of go through what the process is once you have finished dieting. You need to do a reverse. So just as if you would reduce calories over time when you're dieting, you need to reverse them back up slowly over time when you are finished your dieting phase, because we need to have the body not in a low energy state for a long period of time. So if you are eating, say, 1,500, we need to get the body used to being able to maintain your fat loss or maintain your weight whilst building the intake back up, right? So you can't just go straight back to your original calories, because you may end up be eating a shit ton more than what you were to begin with, right? We have to do it over time. So this might mean if you're on 1,500, increasing to 1,600, maintaining there for 2 to 3 weeks, maybe even a month. Make sure your body gets used to that and actually check your body out to make sure that, hey, we're maintaining our weight. We're feeling okay. And then you increase them again, maybe 100, maybe 200. You get to 1,700. Hang out there for a little while. Make sure that you can maintain that weight there, because the body is trying to adapt. Then you build to 18, 19, so on. And you slowly build the intake back up to where it was in the beginning or where it should be. But people miss this step. It's the most important step. And this is why so many people yo-yo and can't maintain their fat loss. So that's what I notice happen all the time. That's in terms of dieting itself, and this is like the issue that I face with a lot of clients who don't understand this concept, or just generally people who've never had coaching that just think, I just eat as little as possible and then don't think about what has to happen in order for you to maintain that after. But I think a lot of this also comes back to the habits you build along the way, and remembering that once you're finished your goal, the habits should be things you continue to keep, rather than just going, oh, well, I'm done now, and then throwing it out the window.
Yeah, I think that's where a lot go wrong. Again, maintenance is the most important, because we need to learn how to live our everyday lives. And I see a lot of people doing challenges where, you know, they'll be so strict for that 6 weeks and not continue the habits ongoing, which is what I love about like our challenges that we do or that we work with our clients, is because we're giving them education and we're making sure they're being like consistent with their habits, so then they continue that after and not just lose everything.
Yeah, because it does happen all the time. People will restrict, and they'll restrict for so long without doing the next step, which is the reverse, or alternatively, they'll just restrict to a point that's so unsustainable that they just throw in the towel because it becomes too hard, which is like a whole nother topic in itself. So that's what I see when it comes to like aesthetics, reversing, and where people go wrong with specifically dieting phases. And the reason I personally wanted to bring this up is because, as I said, so many people come to me and they don't even know that reversing is a thing. They just go, oh, well, I just want to drop weight. And then they go, but what do I do after that? And it's like, well, you actually have to go through a proper reverse so that you can basically slowly build your intake back up, but also maintain the progress that you've made, because otherwise you're going to be more susceptible to putting body fat on later. And also, just a fun fact for you guys, we actually don't lose, this is going to confuse people, we don't lose body fat. So we have fat cells, which is our body fat. And when we lose weight, you guys, this is going to blow your minds. When we lose weight, our fat cells just shrink. They don't actually disappear. So technically we're not losing them, we're just shrinking them. And this is why when you go through a dieting phase, you're more susceptible to putting body fat back on, because, as I said, the body adapts, but it also likes to stay the same. It doesn't like change that much. So we have this process in the body called homeostasis, which is where I guess I would say it's where the body's most comfortable. So if it's used to having, say, fat cells that are, you know, this big, and if you can't see, it's like probably a 50-cent coin, right? And then you shrink them because you're losing body fat. The body wants to go back to what it originally was at. So you're actually more susceptible to like increasing those fat cells again post dieting. And this is why reversing is so important, because it helps the body learn that actually this is the new normal and this is where we want to maintain now, rather than trying to go back to homeostasis, which is like what I guess it feels safe in. So like I hope that makes sense and breaks it down, because I know it can be super confusing. But yeah, fun fact for you guys, we don't lose fat cells, we just shrink them.
Yes, I remember when I learned about that, I was like,
yeah, like
mind blown. But no, that was a very interesting fact. And I'm sure you would have noticed that Steph did most of the talking on that one, because I can't really speak from the aesthetic point of view. And for me, being more performance-based, performance coach, the way I've come across reverse dieting is a lot of people I've worked with, in even myself in the past, where coming from, again, the mentality of like eating less, moving more, and the marketing of like carbs are bad, avoid high fat, all of that stuff. So then when clients have come to me and have a goal of a half marathon, and then I see how little that they're eating, I was like, whoa, like we got to get you some more calories, because especially when it comes to performance, and if you're eating in a deficit, that's going to be so much room for injuries and overtraining and fatigue, and you're not going to feel very good while you're training. So when clients come to me and they have had that in the past, I'll get them to track just what they normally do for a couple of weeks, so I can see where their current maintenance is at, and then we're slowly increasing, and also because our volume of exercise is increasing as well. But yeah, as we said, making sure that we're doing it like fairly slowly, because we need to get the body to adapt slowly.
Yeah, because whether you're doing it for aesthetics or for performance, right, if you just increase calories by 500 or 600 per day, there is a very good likelihood that you're going to put weight on, because it becomes your surplus. From a from a performance side of things, do you find, like, I'd love for you to talk on this, do you find that like a lot of people come to you that are severely under eating that you have to reverse?
Pretty much all of them, to be honest. Yeah. Let's say 80%. Yeah. Especially I had one where he reminded me of myself in the way that before I did my studies, I got very overwhelmed with information online. And so you see all the different fad diets and everything, all the intermittent fasting, and then people, they get body scans and not fully understanding them. So they see their basal metabolic rate, what you literally need to survive, and they think that's what they should be eating throughout the day, even with their running and their day-to-day life. So I've had to educate people around that. And it was a male client as well, and he was very surprised about how much he actually could eat.
Yeah.
So, and same with one of my other clients who's training for a marathon. She would just have a protein shake at lunch and a protein yogurt at breakfast. And I was like, girl.
Wow.
Yeah. And so a lot of the clients I've worked with I've had to educate them to eat more.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are very surprised by that. They're like, wow, like they're so surprised how much they can eat and like how carbs aren't bad. Carbs are fuel.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And I mean, don't get me wrong, everyone comes from such different backgrounds of education. And I think it's important to recognize the fact that, I mean, you don't know what you don't know, but that's what this podcast is for, right?
Yeah.
So when it comes to reversing, I mean, from my perspective, for the clients I work with that are more, muscle building or fat loss, I find for a lot of them, reversing is like the most important thing after their phase is complete, because that's going to help them maintain that. From your experience as a performance-based coach, what's your process with reversing people so that, I guess, anyone listening to this that might be more catered to that goal can understand what they can do and how to maybe recognize the signs as well?
Okay, so I guess if someone's come to me first, I'll get them to track or food journal, depending what they want to do, for a couple of weeks, just to see what they have been eating. And then a lot of the time, because I'm educating around performance, I'm making sure they're having something to eat before they train, depending on how long they're running for, making sure they're having food throughout and then after, to make sure we're recovering well. And so, yeah, a lot of people still like train fasted, like run on an empty stomach, which if it works for some, but if your goal is performance, eat. And then that would be, that's kind of the main education I do around. And also if for people that are doing like marathons, half marathons, slowly increasing more. And also we're not always eating the same thing every single day, because if you're doing 20-kilometer run, you're going to be eating a lot more like the 2 days leading up to that. But then if you're having a rest day, you're not going to eat that much. So educating around that, it's not like you're just going to eat
The same every day.
Yeah. So it can fluctuate depending. So just, educating around like how much your body's burning. And the way I work out like calories and macros is normally like grams per kilo of body weight. So if we're going to get into the nitty gritty, if you're doing like your average training, then like 3 to 5 grams per kilo of body weight. And then when we're getting up, like if someone's doing marathon, I'd be making sure you're at the 5 grams. Then if we're carb loading, then we're like building up to like the 7, the 8, the 9, even up to 12, depending.
And this is for calories, you mean? Grams is per calorie?
Yes. Grams of carbs per kilo body weight for your food. So that's the performance side of things. But also to be mindful of once you've finished the race as well, because it has happened before where they've then become used to eating so much for their training, and then after they've finished their event and then still eating the same amount and then putting the weight on. And so then that can cause some body image issues. So we, I've worked with clients continued after about how to slowly
decrease it.
Decrease it.
Which is, I guess, it's the same concept as like going into a deficit, but it's actually not a deficit. It's just bringing the intake down to match their output, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, cool. So that's like a really interesting kind of, I guess, 2 different ways as to how we go about things, but it's exactly the same thing regardless. Like reverse dieting to make sure that people are getting to where they need to be. And then, so in terms of the clients that you've had from a performance base that come to you and they're severely under eating, have many of them been, I guess, like okay with you going, we have to slowly increase your intake? Or has there been anyone that's been a bit like, I don't want to do that? I'd love to hear your experience on that.
Not that they don't want to. They were like shocked by it. They were like, oh, I thought this is what I had to do. I thought this is what is quote unquote healthy. A lot of them struggle to track properly.
Yeah.
So that can become a factor, or a lot of people ask me for advice, which I'm there to do, but then they're not tracking properly, so that I don't have the data to go on, which does make it hard. But in terms of your question, no one's ever been like, no, I don't want to do that. One client I did work with, she didn't, she started to have body image issues. Once she started eating more and training more, she was putting on a little bit of like higher scale weight, but it most likely muscle. And she said she felt heavier, and it kind of led to these other more psychological aspects. And so in that aspect, I really teach them to appreciate their body for what it can do rather than how it looks or what the scale weight is. So that's
really interesting that you bring that point up, because I just wanted to touch on that too, actually. I have done this with multiple clients where we have put them through a reverse. And to kind of preface what I'm about to say, there is obviously the reverse diet you have to do after a dieting phase, which is, as I've mentioned previous, bringing the calories back up slowly so that you can maintain your fat loss. But then there's also clients that come to me who want to lose weight but have been severely under eating for such long periods of time that we've got nowhere to go. Like, there's nowhere else to go. So if you've come to me on 1,500 calories and you're like, I want to lose weight, I want to drop 10 kilos, I'm like, great, but I can't, I don't have the calories to drop for you to go into a deficit. And then we go into, a whole different aspect of people's bodies not functioning properly because they're severely under eating. So just to preface this as well, there are times where this may be you and you actually have to go through a reverse diet first before you can do the actual diet. So, and I'll go into that in a minute, but I guess where I'm going with this is I've had clients where they've come to me, they've understood it once I've explained it in terms of having to reverse, but because they're so focused on wanting to lose weight or maintain their current weight or whatever it be, and they do have those body image issues, it's interesting because the second that they start eating more, all of a sudden all of these triggers come up and all of these things come up about how, I must be putting weight on, the scale weight's going up, da-da-da-da-da. And I've worked with specific clients who have been so fixated on the scale weight no matter what I do and what I say and how I educate them, that it actually clouds their complete judgment over what the real hard evidence is. Because I think some people are just so focused on the one element without looking at all the other things happening around them. So when it comes to scale weight and eating more food, I think we need to understand as well, just as a side point, that naturally if you're eating more, you are going to weigh heavier because you're eating more food, which is more mass. So let me give you an example. Let's all just picture me holding an apple right now. By the way, I'm not, but if we pictured it, I'm holding an apple. It physically holds weight. You eat that apple, that weight that I'm holding in my hand is in my body now. So you have to understand that from a perspective of volume of food, when you're eating food, you're going to weigh heavier because you've got food in your stomach. But then the other thing is, when you're talking carbohydrates specifically, for every gram of carbs that you consume, I think it's 200 to 300 mils that gets stored in the body as well. So when people are eating more food, they're eating more carbohydrates, and then they see the scale weight going up. Well, how many more mils of water are you also retaining? Because that's how the body functions. And people get really sidetracked because they're too busy focusing on that rather than the actual true hard facts. Do you see that happen as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And people feeling fluffier when they eat carbs. It's right. Purely because it's just holding a bit more water weight.
You're pulling more water into the body.
And same if you start taking creatine, you might notice that the scale weight goes up because it's holding more water.
Yeah, and it's not. It doesn't mean it's body fat. I think we need to just clarify the fact that if you see the scale weight going up, doesn't necessarily mean it's body fat. But you've got to look at every element of what you're doing and what you've changed to then understand why this is happening. One thing I love about being a coach is when clients do come to us and they might have in their check-in or whatever it is that they have this concern, and we look through all the data and we can instantly see what's happening without even having to, go right into it. We can see that, well, you've recently increased your carbohydrates, or your period's due, or you haven't been sleeping well, and we can just see all of the data points to understand why that's going up rather than, oh no, I'm putting body fat on. I love that part because so many clients get mind blown and they're like, oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
I remember working with some clients last year where unhealthy habit where they would weigh themselves multiple times a day and then asking me when is the best time to weigh themselves, morning or afternoon, and educating about morning, first thing after being to the bathroom, and the whole concept of food and water weighs. So as soon as you consume that, or sodium retention, water retention. So educating a lot of people around that, because a lot of people just see a number on the scale and think it's body fat.
Yeah, but also if you look at yourself, you've also got bones and muscles and skin and water. Do you know the body's made up of 70% water or something? Like, and so when people go, oh yeah, that makes sense. But I just wanted to point it out in case you haven't thought of it. Because I know it's like when you're just so accustomed to seeing a number and just assuming it's one thing, it's really good to then realize otherwise. But the last thing that I wanted to touch on in terms of reverse dieting as well is what I was just talking about before, where we might have somebody who wants to start a dieting phase and they are starting their dieting phase, but they've already been eating like really low calories. So again, let's use the 1500 example. And they're like, Steph, I want to drop weight. And I'm like, well, we can't really do that because you're under eating already. So again, remember the body down regulates, the systems slow down, which is what we mentioned before. So you're already used to eating 1500. That's probably your maintenance. Anything below that has health risks involved. If you're eating, not all the time, we do have to understand that there is individual circumstances like your height, your weight, your activity level. This is just a random example. But let's say you're severely under eating the amount that you should be, and your system slow down, health risks are also posed here, and the ability for your body to make progress because it may stop responding because it's not really in a position to want to do what you ask it to. And so people get frustrated because they go, and I hear this all the time, I have been trying to lose weight for so long and I'm not seeing any progress and I can't, it doesn't matter what I do. And then I go, okay, well, how much are you eating? They go X amount. And let's say it's, I don't know, 1,400. How long have you been eating like that for? I don't know, 6 months, 12 months, whatever it is. And I go, well, this is why. Because you have gotten yourself to a point where you've been severely under eating for so long now that your body recognizes that as normal and that's now your maintenance. To diet, you need to eat less than that, but you can't survive off nothing. So the only option, and I'm going to repeat that, the only option if this is you is to reverse diet first. That is the only option, because I promise you, if you try to continue to diet and eat less and less and less and less, you're going to end up in the exact same position you're in now. You're not going to see progress because you don't have your body in a prime position to actually want to respond the way you want it to. So reverse dieting is the only option for you in that sense. Now, what does that look like? That means, again, slowly increasing your calories over time, understanding that it is a long process, it is a bit of a lengthy process, but it is important to get your body back to a point where it actually wants to respond and actually trusts you again. And I know that sounds harsh, but in reality, that's what it is. So that when you do decide to diet, you will actually see the progress you're after and it will respond the way you want it to. So we need to understand that yes, for some, they want to lose weight now, but if you've already gotten yourself to a point where you're eating so little and you're not seeing progress, we need to be reversing you and getting you up to a place where you're actually able to maintain where you're at, eating your perceived maintenance, which is what the macro calculator will tell you, thereabouts. So let's say you're eating 1,400. The macro calculator says your maintenance is 2,400. Well, guess what? We got some work to do because you need to be able to build your calories to that number and then sit there for a while. Now, the other thing is people get impatient and they try and build the calories up too quickly. Then they put on more body fat. So you have to be patient with it. The second thing I see people do is get to that number, their perceived maintenance, and then straight away they're like, great, I can diet now. Not quite. We have this concept called time in diet equals time out of diet. So basically what this means is that if you've been dieting for 6 months or if you've been eating really low intake for 6 months, you should at a minimum be out of your diet for that long. That's going to help your body fully recover. So if you've been eating 13, 14, 1,500 calories and not seeing progress for 6 to 12 months, guess how long it's probably going to be before you can drop back into a diet and see the progress you want. That sucks, I know, but it's the truth. So not only do you have to build it up, but then you've got to sit there. You've got to sit there for a while, sit at maintenance, hold your maintenance and allow yourself to be okay with holding that maintenance. And God, you're going to feel $1 million for it too. You just feel so good because magic happens at maintenance.
Absolutely. You've done so well informing everyone. So I think this has been a very confusing topic.
Yeah.
And the last thing I want to say is because I forgot to answer your question before about like signs and symptoms of if someone is like training for performance and under eating without knowing it. So you might be feeling like super fatigued, just tired to get up as in general, or your runs, you might feel like your muscles will feel really heavy and you just feel really empty, just not much to give. Or you keep getting reoccurring injuries, and like overuse injuries is very common here. Like honestly, I've experienced all of these because I know what I went through in the past. And what is another symptom?
And by
So
the
that's
way,
really-
these are all things like regardless of what your goal is, you'll feel these things 100%.
Yeah.
For some people, it's other things like you might start noticing more hair loss,
Yeah.
loss of period.
Yeah, even weak nails. I learned about this recently. It's like because your body is kind of in survival mode and it's putting all of its energy to like your vital organs to survive, your period goes, your hair will get weaker, your nails will get weaker. And yes, I thought that was very interesting. All things to look out for.
Yeah. And then lastly, if you're unsure, reach out to a coach.
Yes.
We always say it, but it's because that's what we're here for. And that's because a lot of people think, oh, I can just do it myself. But then they hear stuff like this and they go, oh, I didn't know that. Chances are if you didn't know, it's because you're not in a position to do it yourself and you could fuck yourself up by doing it yourself. Hence why so many people have to reverse diet before they start a dieting phase, because they fucked themselves thinking that the less I eat and the more I move, the better. And it's just not the case.
Not the case at all.
I think hopefully we've explained this well enough, because I know, once again, as you said, it's very confusing for some people, but I really just want to preface, if anyone has questions on this, is still a little bit unsure and just feels like they need more clarification around this topic, please reach out. Like, we're more than happy to do another episode on this to go even deeper into it. I think the biggest thing is like trying not to go into it from a science point of view where it gets really confusing. We're trying to keep it quite simple. But if you have any questions at all, like, reach out to us. If you have specific things on this topic you want us to dive into more, we can do that as well. But lastly, I would just say make sure you're looking after yourself and educating yourself constantly, because the more you know, the better you'll get.
Absolutely.